Hello, this is Moonrabbit, the Zlotnick in the Twin Cities, and I've been studying astrology since the late 70s. And I'm here today to talk to you about the charts of twins and look at the idea of fate and free will. And I'm an identical twin, although my twin sister is no longer alive. But I've been interested in twins during my whole astrological career because you have a unique set of situations where people have the similar birth chart and the same environment. So I think twins are very interesting to study. So in my study of twins, I've come to the belief that every single person wants to be a unique individual. And because twins share their parents, their DNA, most of their horoscope, how they express the chart is by splitting it. So they could take some part of a sign and one of them will show one part of it and one of it will show another part. So an example of that would be one of the Leo twins is very, very creative and artistic, and the other one has a whole bunch of children, loves children. The other thing that twins do is that they find a positive expression or they can find a more negative expression. So as I go through, I'm going to show you examples of both. So when we think about fate and free will, when we decide something, we decide against something else. And I think that's part of how twins split the chart, is that if their twin is super, super brainy, then they're going to find another way to express who they are. So the way that people look at charts to find differences between twins is to start with the degrees on the ascendants. And many, many twins are born like 10 minutes apart, sometimes as little as 4 minutes apart. I did a reading for a parent whose twins had the exact same time of birth. So that was unusual. They had the exact same chart. So there's a certain variation, but it's very, very small. So we look at the degrees on the ascendant, and if those degrees are in different decans, so if one twin has, like, let's say 8 Sagittarius and the next one has 11 Sagittarius, then you can use the subset. So each zodiac sign is divided into 3 parts. And like for Aries, the first 10 degrees is ruled by Aries, the second 10 degrees is ruled by the second fire sign Leo, and the third 10 degrees is ruled by Sagittarius. So that's a commonly known way of differentiating the zodiac. If that doesn't work, then you can use the Dwad system where each sign is divided by 12 degrees, so every 2.5 degrees. And then you get subsets just like you do in the decans, and you can read that way. So I'll give you examples of those. And then each degree, the zodiac has a unique Sabian symbol, so if they're super close, I use those. Sometimes in the charts of twins, planets will be in different houses. And then I think the nodes stand out no matter where they are as a way to help what people are bringing from the past. So my presentation today will be in case studies. And I'm going to use this first set of twins a little bit more. I'm going to go into their charts a little bit more in detail because they are old and there's a lot of examples to use. So they're only born 4 minutes apart. And the only thing really that's different is that the midheaven is 1 degree apart, okay? But they've had very different lives and they're different people. And the main way that I observed these differences is that one of them had an external, refocused, difficult life, and the other one had more internal difficulties that showed up periodically. And in the chart of these twins, you'll see that the karmic role is very, very strong, and things related to unconscious beliefs is very strong. So here's the main difference, is that twin 1 has 7 Virgo on the midheaven, and twin 2 has 8 Virgo on the midheaven. But they both have the 24 degrees of Scorpio rising, okay? Excuse me. So when you look at these charts, for all practical purposes, they are very, very identical, and they are identical twins. So you'll see in the chart that the pattern of the chart is a ball with Uranus leading, Jupiter's on the horizon, and all 10 planets are above the horizon. Okay. Try and go back. Okay. So here you can see it visually. Here's the Jupiter on the ascendant, the planets above the horizon, and the only opposition in the charts is the nodes. So they have the South Node in Scorpio rising and the North Node in Taurus setting. Okay, then the other significator in this chart is the ruler of the ascendant, Pluto, is conjunct Saturn, which only happens every 38 years or so. And it's happening now in the year 2000. So the time previous to this, when we had this conjunction, was right at the end of World War II. And the conjunction is really corresponding many times to people who incarnate during very difficult periods of time socially, or who internalize these very shadowy energies as parts of their evolutionary paths. And in the charts of the twins, because Pluto rules the South Node, we can tell that they have unfinished business that they bring in from past lives. Okay. So both twins are still alive. They're very, very close, and they go on yoga and meditation retreats together. So let's look at their personality first. So they both have that tendency to catastrophize, expect the worst, and worry. And they worry a lot about people dying, getting injured, or getting sick. And I believe that's associated with the ruler of the ascendant, Pluto being conjunct Saturn, and then squaring Jupiter on the ascendant tends to exaggerate that. So therefore the catastrophizing. The twins consider themselves to be kind and compassionate people. And you see that a lot with Virgo suns, because Virgo essentially is very much a sign of service. The twins are both perfectionists, going back to the Virgo sun again, and they both work so hard on their work projects, which is, I think, associated with the sun in the 10th house. So the older twin is more comfortable being vulnerable and disclosing her feelings in groups and one-on-one, and they both have a moon trine Jupiter. But the second twin doesn't disclose her feelings except to her very most intimate friends, which is characterized by an 8th house moon. So they both have the same moon in the moon Jupiter trine, but one of them will play out part of it and one of them will play out the other part. The older twin is more outspoken and comfortable expressing anger. This is the moon conjunct Mars. And the younger twin keeps it inside and doesn't always know that she's angry. So here's that moon in Cancer in the 8th house. So it's a watery moon, Mars. And it makes a nice trine to Jupiter and its sextiles that sun, Venus. So it's a very well situated moon, Mars, except that it's in the 8th house. And that creates some stress for the moon in terms of expression. Okay, so the twins, born in 1947, were a surprise. There were only expected to be one. And the older twin was the smaller one. And I wrote down that she told she was in an incubator, but she doesn't remember that, but I'm sure that it's true. The twins agreed that they had happy childhoods. And I think the Jupiter rising on the ascendant is indicating that. They had a lot of friends, they had a lot of freedom, and apparently they had a pretty wealthy family because they had nannies who cared for them. And their mother was described as reserved and remote separately by both of them, but the nannies were very nurturing. At age 13, their father told them that their mother had died. And apparently she was sick, but that was kind of hidden from them. And there was no response to their grief. They both told me separately that they didn't cry after their dad told them that their mom died. And that's common with an 8th house moon and a sun in the 10th house. Those are both positions of being very emotionally reserved and feeling that need to, the sun in the 10th house, to be stoic and do what's expected. So they just kind of closed down and certainly closed themselves off from their father. Then at age 15, they were sent to boarding school because their father remarried. Apparently, he did not quite know what to do with them. And then when they turned 18, as Uranus and Pluto were conjunct in Virgo, this was in the middle 60s, and it was going over their natal sun, Venus, they separated to go to separate colleges, and their lives began to diverge. So the changes through their adult relationships have a lot to do with who they married. And the older twin married her high school sweetheart. And after their marriage, so they'd known each other for 4 years, but after 2 years, no, 4 years, sorry. 3 months after their marriage, he had a psychotic break and he was hospitalized. Then he recovered and they had a child, but he got worse. And apparently he, I think, was diagnosed with bipolar and was very hard to medicate. And so they just decided it was better for them to separate. And she never married again. She first got a job as a librarian and then a social worker. So her life was very much defined by being a single mother, okay? And during this decade that this was going on, this is, I guess, a little bit later, but really from the 70s through the 90s, the twins were very, very distant because I'm going to go into the second twin, but she had a much more conventional life. But then they were brought together because the younger twin had a car accident. And it was at a time that Saturn was transiting square the Saturn-Pluto, and a solar eclipse was in Leo conjunct their Saturn-Pluto, and that triggered them to become close again. So finishing with the oldest twin, there was this trauma with her marriage and the divorce. And then much later in 2004, she got into therapy and uncovered a repressed memory as Neptune opposed that Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So she uncovered a memory of abuse by a babysitter and went on to do therapy to resolve that. So as of now, her health is very good, only minor health issues. The younger twin married a year later after her twin, somebody she met in college, and then he went on to medical school, and they had 2 children. Her children were born earlier than her twins, and then she continued her education after the children were in school and got a master's in early childhood education, got a teaching job, and retired. So she had a long, stable marriage where she raised her children in that marriage. There was no divorce. She worked, but that was because she wanted to. And her life was very, very comfortable, very settled compared to her twins. She had retired in 2003, but then shortly after, her husband developed leukemia and she went back to work. That only lasted 4 years because in her second Saturn return, she developed an illness and had to go back. She went back to work. So there's illness that shows up in both twins' charts. Personally for the second twin, first with her husband, with his leukemia, and then her neurological disorder. So let's slip back to the chart. So it's going the wrong way, sorry. And we'll just look at Chiron for a second. So here's Chiron in the 12th house for both of them. okay, and in the sign of Scorpio, and it is squared to Pluto. It's not marked on here. Uh, and so health problems and other people's health can be very common when Pluto is there in the 12th house, sorry, Chiron, and when it makes a square to Pluto, things emerge and disrupt life. Okay, so the second twin we can see had more problems, injury from a car accident, and then her neurological disease. The older twin had more emotional and mental health issues with her husband as well. So the nodal early life experience, I think, defines the difference between these two women. Both twins have the South Node rising in Scorpio, and that brings themes of chaos, powerlessness, and abandonment from the past. Of course, they suffered together, both from the loss of their mother and this kind of being discarded by their father. And they internalized and externalized that pain differently. So the older twin did it through a difficult marriage and a divorce. And then the younger twin through her husband's health problems, her own health problems. Okay, so we talked about Chiron and Scorpio in the 12th house. So just a wet picture of twins. Okay, the second pair of twins that I'm going to talk to you about have greater variation in their charts, even though they're just born 10 minutes apart. So you can see that the older twin has 2 degrees Pisces on the ascendant, and the younger twin has 6 degrees Pisces on the ascendant. And what that did, those 10 minutes, is that the older twin just had the moon slipped into the 4th house, where the younger twin's moon stayed in the 3rd. And Venus, for the older twin, moved into the 8th house, where here it's in the 7th. Okay, we have a little change over here between the asteroids, but I'm not going to go into that. Okay, so let me just talk about the charts for a second. That we haven't emphasized 7th and 8th houses here. The ruler of the ascendant, Neptune, is in the 9th house, but there's a strong Libra-Scorpio component, and then the Libra and Scorpio houses are very strong, so relationships are very important, and then kind of looking for the deeper meaning in life and looking underneath the veil of life through the 8th house. So the twins have different dwads, or 12th harmonics, on their ascendants. So the older twin is born right in the first dwad of Pisces. And then this twin is born in the Taurus dwad of Pisces. So the older twin has Pisces rising with the Pisces dwad, and then the younger twin has Pisces rising with the Taurus dwad. So the Pisces, double Pisces twin, you get the best and the worst of Pisces with a highly sensitive nature, very emotional, but the Pisces can be an urge to transcend or escape life. And the Taurus dwad is more grounded and a little bit more realistic. And then I'll talk about the different placement of the moon and the Venus. But I believe that the younger twin, because of those, had more capacity. So the story that really separated these twins is that they only shared the first 15 years of their life. So there wasn't a lot to glean because they were so young about how they were the same and how they were different. But they were picky eaters, which I see often with Pisces rising. And they hated a lot of foods, the same ones, except when it came to ice cream, one liked chocolate and the other vanilla. They differentiated themselves because one was sloppy and one was neat. And I don't really see that in the chart. I think it doesn't matter so much at this young age. So their story is that the younger twin, it's the older twin, sorry, the double Pisces ascendant died 10 days before they turned 15. He was found with a makeshift noose around his neck, and it could have been autoerotic asphyxiation, which is what his twin thought, because he didn't seem. Part of the interest in astrology is doing something called death charts. And I use them as a way to help people understand their path forward, and also what was going on when they had a traumatic loss, like the loss of a twin is. And so for the living twin, you'll see that Pluto was coming into an applying conjunction with his sun in the 8th house, while Saturn had passed that, and that Uranus was up at the very top of his chart, transiting an opposition to the moon. The transiting nodes will also square their natal position. One of the things that I like to work with in death chart eclipses, and before the death, there was an eclipse at 19 Gemini conjunct the twins' moons and nadir. The North Node was also there. And then the eclipse at the end of that year was at 11 Sagittarius, also conjunct the twins' midheaven and opposing their moon. So here it is to look at the charts. We have that 15 degrees of the moon and a 15 degree, this is the 15 degree nadir, okay? So the eclipses were right on that axis, very, very critical kind of belonging in the family and belonging in the world. So I talk about this as showing a loss of life for one twin and the loss of identity or a primary bond for the other twin.
Linda?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I think when you're turning the pages, it's making a really loud noise.
Okay.
You have them down near your microphone, perhaps.
I just will keep going forward. I don't have to go back.
No, but I'm just saying, as you're turning your pages on your desk in front of you, it's creating a very loud noise each time.
Okay.
Just letting
so you want me to mute?
No, you just turn the pages just, without making that noise if possible.
Okay, I'll see if I can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the remaining twin really had a hard time losing his brother at 15, and he had multiple addictions and went through treatment multiple times, and he tried overdosing on heroin, but was revived. So in the natal chart, Neptune rules both of the twins' ascendant. It's in the 9th house of Scorpio with 3 planets, including the sun opposite Saturn in the 8th house. And these all together show a tendency towards depression, the sun, Saturn, and a fascination with death, the 8th house. And the South Node links that to karmic or past life themes. Pluto is also conjunct in their natal charts, the South Node and the 7th. And that to me is corresponding with the loss of a primary relationship and past karmic patterns with death and loss. So I'm happy to tell you that the remaining twin now is living in Indiana, and he found a friend in the Twinless Twin support group that really helped him get back on the right track with his life. Okay, so I looked at the chart where the remaining twin, the younger twin, tried suicide. And it was right exactly 20 years after his twin died, 21 years, where Uranus made the first square to his natal Uranus, and it had moved from the midheaven to his ascendant. During the suicide attempt, the South Node was conjunct Jupiter, and there was a solar eclipse opposing his natal Jupiter. And I believe that because Jupiter was so heavily aspected, that allowed him to survive, even though he told me he didn't want to. So here's another picture of twins. Okay, here's the third set of twins. They're born in 1996, and they are going to be, they're going to have the most diversity in terms of minutes apart and differences on their ascendant of any of the two twins that we look at. They're born 17 minutes apart. And you can see that the older twin has Leo 22, the younger one has almost 26 Leo. And we have a shift here where the younger twin's Neptune is in the 5th house, as opposed to her sister in the 6th. And then the other thing I'm going to point out, because of their describing their personalities differently, is that the younger twin, they both have Mars in the 9th, but the younger twin has Mars closer to the 8th, where the older twin has it more clearly. There are fire sign, Mars and Aries in a fire sign and a fire house. So these twins have ball patterns in their chart, like the first twins, and Jupiter leads the ball, emphasizing their 9th house suns. They also have Jupiter opposing their moons in Cancer and squaring the nodes. And they are very kind of outgoing, bright, optimistic, young people who are searching for truth and meaning in life, and very, very busy and active. The nodes in Aries and Libra, along with 7 planets on the relationship side of the chart, show relationships being so important to them. And they stay in contact with each other every day, even though they're both in relationships with other people. So they have that 9th house, liking the outdoors. They both got BAs in humanities in the 9th house. Again, the ruler of the ascendant in the 9th house and the 9th house sun. They describe themselves as loyal friends. The moon is in the 11th, which makes friendship very important. And Leos are very loyal. And they're very close to their parents with the moon in Cancer in the 11th. So they describe themselves as being very different personality-wise. The older twin is extroverted and the younger twin is introverted. The older twin hates showing emotion and the younger twin wears her heart on her sleeve. The older twin just gets angry. The younger twin holds everything inside and holds grudges. The older twin saves money, the younger one doesn't. The older twin works for Habitat for Humanity and the younger twin for outdoor outfitter. And then one of the things that I was interested in was if one of the twins identifies as gay or queer, well, they both. And these two don't. So I'm going to talk about that. So I looked at the dwads. And the older twin's Leo ascendant falls into Taurus dwad, while her sister falls into Gemini dwad. And she is the one who saves money, which we often see with Taurus people. The older twin is the one who has Neptune in the 6th, not in the 5th. And she's the one who works for Habitat for Humanity. And the younger sister, by a few minutes, with Neptune in the 5th, does a lot of outdoor stuff and some relating to children. They both show different aspects of a Cancer moon, because one aspect of a moon in Cancer is the heart on the sleeve and the other is the hard outer shell of the crab. I thought that it was a little unexpected that the older twin with the Taurus Dwad would show anger, but her Mars is solidly in the 9th house, while her sister's is much closer to the 8th house. And then the Gemini, the younger twin with the Gemini Dwad, reported that she's introverted, but she's extremely talkative with her friends. So I wanted to look at the transit chart for the coming out. And it's a very, very lovely, I think, coming out chart, because Uranus, which has to do with breaking free of expectations and being authentic and separating yourself from the status quo. If you look in the 8th house, which is roughly associated with sexuality, you see that Uranus is coming over to transit the South Node. They're in the 8th house. And Venus just happened on the day of the coming out to be conjunct Uranus. And this is a kind of separating or becoming an individual related to sexual identification, Venus conjunct Uranus. Just kind of a more minor aspect, but the South Node is a little more distant, is moving kind of into an applying conjunction with Mars. And Mars often will have to do with sexuality. And then down here, transiting Mars is on Chiron in a few days to be on the nodes. And so there's a real kind of sensibility in this coming out chart of her coming into her true self, being separate from her twin or a unique individual from her twin. There's a couple other little tiny aspects that I thought, it's uncanny how the chart tells a story. The sun's lighting up the planet of communication, and the planet of communication is aligning with Venus. So it looks like a pretty well received coming out. This is 2014. So at that point, gay marriage had been legal in Minnesota where they live. So what I thought was really interesting about this experience is that, the coming out was a distinct kind of change for the older twin. But during that same period of time, her twin went on a canoeing trip. These are very rugged, where you're in the wilderness for 48 days. So there's a camp in Minnesota where you start when you're 14 or 15, going into the wilderness for 2 weeks, and you basically work your way up. So you're with a group of girls and 2 guides that are also female, and you canoe on these Arctic rivers in Canada and Alaska. And so she reported that this was life-changing for her. It was so challenging, and it was so hard, and it really gave her a different, much bigger sense of who she was than she had ever had before. So they both experienced this very big transit, this transit of Uranus going over their nodes in really, really different ways. And that lasted that whole summer, just the coming out date. Okay, so here's the last case study. And these are twins that are born 16 minutes apart. And we have a Virgo ascendant at 6 degrees and Virgo ascendant at 9 degrees. And this chart, we have Mars very close, but 6 degrees off the ascendant for the older twin, and even closer on the ascendant, 3 degrees for the younger twin. Jupiter just snuck into the older twin's 2nd house. And then the other change was the angular Venus for twin number 2 is closer. So here it's 7 degrees, and here it's 4 degrees, okay? So their chart, they have a very, very exact Mercury-Sun conjunction. It's within minutes, and then that opposes Uranus and Neptune. which is going to become very, very important when we talk about their lives. And then there's a fixed T-square that I kind of see as a grand square if you bring Saturn opposing Chiron and the moon opposing Pluto, all in fixed signs, squaring and opposing each other. And these different aspects are basically so their mother used IVF to get pregnant and was carrying triplets until the 6th or 7th month of pregnancy. She lost the third baby. And then she was on bed rest after that. And the twins were born premature, but not so premature. They needed an incubator. So the grand crossed in fixed signs with the moon opposing Pluto and squaring Saturn and squaring Chiron will sometimes refer to that really early life trauma with the moon. And they didn't find out about their brother until their grandmother told them about it when they were 14, and they went home and their mom wouldn't talk about it. So that's even though it's not very well understood, there is a very, very deep wound when you're in utero, whether it's with a twin or with a triplet, and then they're gone, because there's a sense I'm part of a support group for twins who have lost their twins or multiples who have lost their multiples. And there's a subgroup in that for the prenatal loss. It's an ambiguous loss, and people misunderstand it and feel like it's nothing when really your energy is shared in utero with this other living creature, and then they're gone. Okay, so the other thing that characterizes these twins' lives is the Sun-Mercury conjunction that opposes the Neptune-Uranus conjunction. And their father recovered from using alcohol when they were 5, but never really kind of completely healed from it. And that was another family secret. The thing I should have mentioned, but I didn't. Chiron's part of that Grand Cross, and so that often can be mental health issues as well as physical ones. Okay, so the younger sister started having mental health issues at age 14, and it actually was just a few months after her grandmother told them about the triplet that was lost. And now she's diagnosed as bipolar and is on medications, but she told me that she's had hallucinations from the age of 5. And she would see things and her twin never did. So they were very different from very, very early life. Then she experienced a sexual assault when she was in college, and her twin never experienced anything like that. I looked just because I'm very interested in kind of, what re-triggers trauma. And there was an eclipse at 11 Gemini, which now I don't exactly remember. I think it might have squared one of the oppositions. So the younger twin was working as a general manager of a restaurant before the pandemic. The older sister was developed with, I think it's autoimmune disorder, Crohn's disease, at age 10. And basically was sick for 5 years. And now it's somewhat under control, only periodically sick. But they agreed that the older twin was larger, bolder, and louder, and protected the younger twin until that illness she'd been sick for 5 years, and then the younger twin became the kind of protector and the loud one. And her sister, the older sister, who'd always been bigger, ended up being shorter. So the older twin went to art school, and the Venus, if you remember, was a little closer in the older twins chart. It was a little closer to the midheaven. Now I got to look back. Anyway, they both have strong Venuses in the 10th house, and one of them went to art school and one of them didn't. And just like the very first set of twins, when they went to separate colleges, it was difficult for them. There was a lot of adjusting they had to do. So as you can see, even people born in the same families with really, really nearly identical charts will have very different life experiences. And it takes me back to the fact that an astrologer can't, well, first when you look at a chart, you don't know if it's a chart for a city or a person or an event. So you can't tell the evolution of a client from their birth chart. So you can't really tell how each twin will express the birth chart or how the birth chart will exactly manifest in either twin's lives. So as a twin, I've read a lot of books about twins, and I know that twins are studied by scientists to try and understand this nature versus nurture question. And the thing that's so interesting is that twins who are raised apart actually have many, many more similarities than twins who are raised together, because they're not competing with each other to have an individual identity. So there is a twin study, a very, very extensive twin study of these two twins separated at birth. And they both were married 3 times, and their wives had the exact same name. They both drank the same Budweiser beer. They smoked the same brand of cigarettes. They both drank their coffee with their pinky in the air. There were so many uncanny similarities, the same brand of toothpaste, really how they wore their clothes, how they dressed, never ever having met each other until they were in their 50s. So I think that twins with very close charts, given separate environments, which shouldn't happen because it's not good for the twins, will be very, very similar. But these twins that I chose for the case studies were raised together as much as their lifespan allowed, or college, until college separated them. But in those early formative years, they worked very, very hard to create a separate identity from each other and to differentiate themselves from each other. And I think especially in the first example and the last example, with illness and the illness of the spouse, there are often these events outside of a person's control that will shape their identities that was present in both that first set of twins and the last set of twins. So that wraps up my presentation, and I'm very happy if there's any questions that want to be presented to me by chat to take a couple of questions.
Linda, thank you. I do have a question. I met somebody about 10 years ago, I just met her online, and she had the exact same birth date and very close time of birth to myself. And we had very similar lives, you know, very, very similar. Any comment on that?
Yes, so there are Astro twins, you know, and in my many years of practice, I've had clients who have the same charts, basically, more or less. And so I introduce them to each other if they're both interested. And one set of Astro twins is very much like what you described, Linda, where they have very parallel kinds of experiences in their lives, and they just like each other so much that they always now call each other on their birthday. But the other set of twins, it was so interesting because one really, I think, kind of manifested the shadow side of the energy. And so the twin who was more the client of mine really couldn't tolerate her astro twin. So it to me reflected kind of both sides of this. Is it fate or is it free will? Because I think that the evolutionary path that the person is on is not inherent in the chart at all.
Great, thank you. And Sue has a question for you.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
I am curious if how common it is for a person to lose a twin in utero, and is there any indication in the surviving twins chart
Wow. Okay.
afterwards?
I don't know how to answer how common it is. That would be probably like you'd have to look at some medical records. And sometimes, the mother doesn't even realize if it's really early that there's a miscarriage going on.
Right, yeah.
But I do think that there would be some aspect of trauma around the ascendant or relating to the moon or the 12th house. There might be something in a prenatal eclipse that could show something like that. Because this is now speaking from my experience as a twin who has really shared with a lot of other twins, both the prenatal loss and the lifetime loss. A piece of you dies with that kind of part of yourself that was connected to this living thing, even though you weren't consciously aware. It's a body memory or a cell memory that you lose. So I don't know if I really answered your question or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've thought about it. I have a Gemini moon, and it's opposite Ceres, and I've always wondered, and there's also something about the Gemini mythology about the
Yes.
one twin looking for the other.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if it's that I associate with that or if it's wishful thinking or, but I always wondered if that was a possibility.
Do you have a sense about it?
My sense is that it is a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So often, this is really interesting. They've done studies of twins, the surviving twin, and when they're really, really little, their parents will report that they have periods of a really inconsolable grief, and that sometimes as little toddlers, they're always like going and looking for someone or something, and their parents can't explain why they're doing that.
Yeah, well, I doubt that my parents would have noticed or even remarked about it or told me.
Okay.
But like I said, it's just something that I've especially after hearing the myth, that I just wonder about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Linda, overall, what is or are the astrological signatures that one would look at? So would it be Venus, since the twins are relating to each other, or Pluto, or what can you whittle it down to?
You mean, is there an astrological signature for twins?
Yes, like why were they born as twins? What is the why?
Boy. So, I've looked at a lot of charts of twins, and I would have to say that I haven't seen any unifying factor. So I had a bunch of theories going into that. Like I have Gemini on the nadir, so that's that very essential part of who I am, being in that twin modality. And then I've seen quite a few twins who have a lot of planets in the 7th house. So, they're like partnering from the get-go, but it certainly isn't universal. And that's what I would tell you in really looking at large numbers of twins charts. There's like a big range. So I'm not really sure that we can say that there's a specific signature.
Okay. But, they were born together as twins, so obviously they have a karma with each other.
Yes,
So
very
they
much.
decided to be born as twins, ensuring that they would be very close to each other throughout the life and have to deal with the evolutionary intentions. That's just what I think.
Yes. Well, and I mean, you know, the twins who uh, lost each other at a young age, I believe that there's some kind of karmic agreement there for the surviving twin.
Mm. Linda, thank you so much. Really looking forward to more from you in the future. Thank you
Okay,
for
thank you.
sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Looking
Thank
forward to
you
seeing you again.
very much.
Okay, bye.
Okay, so nice to meet you.